Welcome to the A.R. Bernard Show, and of course, thanks for joining us today. I am incredibly excited to have today's guest on the show, Stephen A. Smith. The mere mention of his name stirs excitement. He is an accomplished commentator, journalist, and outspoken critic of Dallas Cowboys fans. He is also candid with his audience and never shies away from tough conversations. He's the host of First Take on ESPN and the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. He's a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer and author of his book, Straight Shooter, a memoir of second chances and first takes. Please welcome my good friend, Stephen A. Smith.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Pastor.
Man, it is
sir?
Good to have you on the show.
It's good to see you as always.
And I want to stay consistent with the title of your book, Straight Shooter.
Yes, sir.
You have no problems, like you said when we were talking before we started the program. If you want to know how Stephen A. feels, just ask him, right?
Yeah,
and he'll tell you. So let's jump out the gate, man.
Yeah.
We are seeing what some say as a revival of the Democratic Party.
Right.
With the shift from Joe Biden to now Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee. And I think that that's going to be solidified at the Democratic Convention. But you came out and you said that she's been hiding in plain sight. Right. First of all, what did you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that I think that when you are the presumptive Democratic nominee, and it's been 3 weeks, and you haven't done a single sit-down interview, a single one-on-one interview, a single press conference, and all anybody has seen or heard from you is when you're at pep rallies or you're about to board or deboard an airplane, that's problematic. You are the presumptive Democratic nominee for the presidency of the United States of America. It does not get any more serious than that. You are an accomplished sister. You are a former prosecutor, a former state attorney general in the state of California, a former United States senator, and the reigning vice president of the United States of America. Where you at? Where's the interviews? What are your policies? Fracking, single-payer health care, border security, etc. Where are you? And when your competition is a former president who has been convicted on 34 felony counts, impeached twice, a civil suit loss of $454 million, and we see him being interviewed everywhere. What's your problem? Now, some people would say, Stephen A., that's a bit excessive. I don't view it as a criticism. I view it as a calling out to say, don't get comfortable. Don't think you have this in the bag. We've seen what happens to the Democratic Party when you think like that. We saw what happened to Hillary Rodham Clinton in 2016. Yes, a few weeks before the election, James Comey, then the head of the FBI, comes out with some email scandal, deleted emails and stuff like that. But it was also piggybacking off of unsavory comments by the then GOP nominee, that was Donald Trump, in terms of grabbing women by the you-know-whats and all of this other stuff. And what did you do? You stopped campaigning. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. You got the popular vote, but you didn't win the Electoral College. Fast forward to 2024. We have a president, an incumbent in President Joe Biden, and clearly there's cognitive decline, and it has nothing to do with age. We've seen plenty of people that are older than the age of 81 that are sharp as a tack, and that includes Nancy Pelosi. But when it came to him, there was clear slippage. We just didn't pay enough attention to it because the Democratic Party, figuratively speaking, greased the skids to some degree. There was no primary. So we didn't see him have to stand up in the face of adversity and competition and earn the right to be the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party going into the 2024 election. And then we didn't find that out until June 27th when he showed up on a debate stage, and there was clear slippage. And that was when Democratic donors, Democratic officials all of a sudden stepped in and said what I was saying 8 months earlier. 8 months on camera, I said, we need a new president. Not now, but for the year 2025 and beyond. We don't need to be at a State of the Union chanting 4 more years for somebody that's going to be 82 years of age on Election Day. No. And that's where my position
So
comes
is
from.
the transition that easy? I mean, you know, she was vice president. She has to make sure when she was vice president and continues to be, even though she's campaigning now, presumptive nominee, that she doesn't outshine the president. He had to be front and center. He was the face of the party until the decision was made that he was going to now step back and let someone else step into that role. Is it that easy to transition, to craft a platform, put together policy?
It should be for her
within 3 weeks.
This
is something that she had to make sure she did not overshadow him.
Well, first of all, I don't think overshadowing is the way to look at things in this particular situation. You've been overshadowing him because he was being called to step aside. He didn't want to step aside. He was compelled to do so because the party let him know they were no longer going to get the support that they once were receiving because people had lost faith. I'm telling you what I know. I'm not guessing. I'm not saying you are, of course, but I'm not guessing. I spoke to donors. I spoke to folks in the Democratic Party. I spoke to politicians who behind closed doors were saying these things to him. So I knew that the momentum had shifted. That's number one. Number two, donors, campaign dollars, etc. Didn't go to Biden. It's the Biden-Harris campaign. When we saw him hold press conferences and articulate a message to the public, it was usually Kamala Harris standing by his side. She told us she was one of the last people in the room whenever he made decisions. So it's the Biden-Harris campaign. And on top of it all, you marched lockstep with him. So his policies are your policies. I'm not saying that you shouldn't take time to come out with a plan and a policy and what have you. What I'm saying is you weren't doing any interviews. How about stopping and saying hello? How about taking a few questions? How about literally answering them at a press conference and saying, I'll have that for you in 2 weeks. Okay, I'll have an economic plan for you in 2 weeks. I'm going to come up with a plan to address our border crisis. I'm going to do these things. I'll tell you why I was against fracking, but now I'm for it. I'll tell you why I wasn't as tough on border issues before as I'm about to be. Give me a few days or a week or whatever, and I'll explain this. But to avoid interviews, well, again, that gives the impression that you're trying to circumvent the process. And the Democrats have done this before.
So has she been doing that? And I'm not defending her. I'm just responding to what you're saying, because you're now saying that she's changing her position on the border, which we know that it's a shift from what has been the traditional position. But how do you know that?
I'm not saying she has. I know she's changed her position on fracking because she said that. I'm not saying that about the border. What I'm saying is it's being reported and we're hearing nothing from you outside of pep rallies. That's my point.
Do you feel the media would treat her fairly?
I think the media has been extremely kind to her, and I thought they were to Biden as well, because I think the media has been spending far too much time contemplating the alternative, and as a result, that serves as a motivation not to use the word pacify, because I think that would be too strong and somewhat insulting to people in my industry. I'm saying, however, you see a lot of people in the media wearing on their sleeve, we don't want Trump. And because you don't want Trump, as a result, the kind of meticulous details that you would put on display in terms of scrutinizing candidates under normal circumstances, because these are clearly not normal times, I think in cases with her and to a lesser degree Biden, when we clearly saw that he wasn't what he used to be, there was a strenuous effort put forth to try to pacify things to some degree. And I'm saying, no. You don't get that when you're a candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. That is a hot seat if ever there was one. And when you volunteer for that position, you stand up and you embrace the challenge that comes with it. That is my belief.
But without interview, right,
Yes.
that you're calling for, we know that the messaging is changing. It was singularly, unfortunately, we got to beat Donald Trump.
Yes.
He's a threat.
Yes.
But now we're hearing terms like opportunity, freedom, liberty.
Okay.
And beating Trump is sort of fourth on the list.
Well, it's a given.
So it's changing, though. But the message is changing, which means that there's something going on behind the scenes that you may not be privy to, I may not be privy to, that there's some type of plan in place.
To quote me specifically in terms of exactly what I've said, I had no problem with what she has done up to this point. What happened is I became news because I said, okay, that was fine. It's working. But don't think for 1 second it's going to work in the weeks to come. You're going to have to stand up and face scrutiny for decisions you've made. And it can't just be living off of him, because those are exactly the kind of things that I believe has cost the Democratic Party in the past. I'm not voting for Donald Trump. I don't trust him. I don't trust him as a person. I don't trust him as a statesman. I don't trust his maturity. The only thing I can trust about him is his undeniable narcissism. I don't trust somebody in thinking that way, being in the presidency of the United States of America. I don't trust it. So she has my support. My issue is I don't want her to blow it. And I think on far too many occasions, and I'm going to say this, as a black man, I will never back away from the fact that the Democratic Party has taken the black community for granted on far too many occasions. I stand on that. Now, that's not to say that their policies pertaining to black Americans in this country haven't been better than what the alternative was offering us, no doubt about it. But that still doesn't absolve you from scrutiny. It doesn't absolve you from the hot seat that comes with that position, explaining your positions and making sure that you're accountable to our community. I'm one of those people that have lamented for a very, very long time the lip service we're destined to receive every 2 to 4 years, people telling us what we want to hear, pacifying us or what have you. And then once you get into office, we're always the one behind the 8 ball. I don't like that. That's why I'm a registered independent. It's not because I don't vote Democrat 95% of the time. It's because I want to let you know you don't automatically have my support.
At one time, you were talking about the black vote going to Trump, especially black men, black males going to Trump.
Some of them, yes.
You made it clear that she's got your vote.
That's right.
This
Without
is what
question.
you said.
Without question.
Are you signaling something to the black community about her?
I'm saying to the black community that when you look at the alternative compared to her and the kind of things that we're witnessing, Project 2025, for example, and other things that we're seeing, we're hearing, the rhetoric, just the ambiance of the situation. I don't like what I'm seeing, and I don't think that he's the right person for the job. I think we need an adult in the room. I think we need somebody that's willing to cross the aisle. I think we need somebody that understands what America is supposed to be about and how compromise is the order of the day to some degree at the very least. I think those things are incredibly important. And so I support her because of that. But I am unapologetic in acknowledging I support any Democrat in the year 2024 by default. I wish that I had somebody better to look at. I wish that I had somebody to look at that I didn't have to have those concerns about in terms of being in that seat as a statesman for this country. And I can simply go on a policy by policy basis. A lot of people are going to look at the way Trump has governed in the past. I believe he would be on a revenge tour. I believe that he would be preoccupied with exacting retribution against all those he felt were against him. I believe that when you look at the people that he puts in office, I think one of the great interviews that I saw in the last year or two was when Bret Baier of Fox News sat in front of Donald Trump and he highlighted all these people that Donald Trump had employed and said, you called her dumb as a brick. You called her, this and that. I mean, had names. And he said, these are people you swore by. You said you'd hire the best people. And he literally sounded off about 10 or 11 different people that Donald Trump swore were great, and then he just cast them aside. They wouldn't support him. He questioned their intelligence. He questioned their morals. He questioned everything about them. So how could you then turn around and say that you are the person that would hire this great staff? And I thought that it was incredibly apropos that he did that, because it highlighted how I feel about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You can't trust him. You can't trust him. I believe that you can trust Kamala Harris to be somebody that would commit herself to upholding and protecting what the Constitution says, to working across the aisle, to doing, to having the conscience to do what's in the best interest of the American people and America as a whole, as opposed to doing what's in her single best interest.
So what's wrong with the voting population? I mean, hopefully we are an intelligent people. Trump has been doing what he's been doing in plain sight. When we talk about in plain sight, he's been doing it in plain sight.
Yes.
Why are we not convinced that he lies, that he can't be trusted?
I don't think that's
he can't handle power. That he's immature.
I don't think that's the problem with the people who support him. First of all, when we talk about Black Americans who support him, I think he got about 6 to 8% of that vote, and it's projected to increase by anywhere from 8 to 10% for this upcoming election. He pulls that off, the Democrats are going to have a problem winning this election. Make no mistake about that. Not to mention the fact that when you're talking about the Latino vote, you're having a bunch of people that may vote against him, obviously because of his positions on the border, but you have an inordinate amount of Latinos that say, hey, I'm all for what he's saying. I had to stand in line. I had to come here legally. I had to become documented. I've got to pay my taxes. Why should other people skip lines and not be obligated to do such things? Because I've spoken to many Latinos who have felt that way. I think this election with Trump will come down to reproductive rights. I think white women are going to decide whether or not he gets elected or not, because I'm certain Black women are not going to vote for him after Roe v. Wade was overturned and he jumped in and took credit for that. But what are white women going to do? I think that's going to be interesting. But when we say people don't trust him and people know he lies, et cetera, we diminish the importance of the reality that a lot of people don't care, because number one, they think all politicians lie. Number two, they religiously feel played by folks on Capitol Hill. And number three, and this is the most important thing, the way he speaks and the way he speaks at them. A lot of people love it because they feel he's speaking for them, because that's exactly how they want to talk to politicians on Capitol Hill.
But is he speaking for them? He is a billionaire,
right?
Supposedly, right?
Yes.
All right, we're not checking the numbers, but he's a billionaire. And he's speaking to working class, blue collar, especially white America. And they think that he's one of them.
Yes, they do think
Can't
that.
Be because of the money.
It's not because of the money. It's because
how many people get to start out with $500 million given to you by your father, and then you go out and make the best of it?
But those folks, they do believe he speaks for them.
Why?
Because the manner in which he speaks to Capitol Hill, they don't want to say, Representative, Senator, I really wish you would do this better. They want to say, you're a piece of garbage. I can't stand y'all. You're a liar. You're this, you're that. They want you to be rude. They want you to be cantankerous. They want to feel like somebody is representing them and not representing Capitol Hill, because the American people have grown excessively and increasingly cynical of Capitol Hill. Why? Because Capitol Hill religiously gets little done in the interest of the American people, in the eyes of the American people. If you're going to come to us, for example, I'm an unapologetic capitalist, I'm fiscally conservative, I'm socially liberal. Everybody knows that about me. I've said it 1,000 times. Here's my thing. I don't mind paying taxes. Why? Why you need so much more now? Didn't you come to me 4 years earlier and said you needed this? Didn't you get it? What are you doing? Everybody else got a budget. How come y'all can't budget? Why does our debt, we used to sit up there and think it was the end of the world coming our way when we had a deficit in the billions. It's now in the trillions, but we print money. We got homelessness in the streets of America. We got Black folks out here. We've been struggling for a long time, but somehow, some way you come up with $53 million for prepaid credit cards for illegal immigrants that were brought over to this city. Okay, we have a situation where you've got homelessness raking through the cities of New York, Chicago, LA. Don't get me started with LA because I'm there a lot and it's really, really bad out there. But somehow, some way, you don't have money to address crime, to address education, to address homelessness in this country. But somehow, some way, you got billions to throw over to Ukraine to fight a war against Russia. I'm not saying you shouldn't have done it. Okay, Russia attacked them. You want to protect them as best as you can. You don't want Russia gaining additional territory. But how'd you come up with the money? Where you get the money from? Okay, and if you had the money to give to Ukraine, that means you had the money to address these problems. When this Israeli-Palestinian conflict took place, when Hamas invaded Israel and kidnapped people and killed folks last October 7th and what have you, okay, you had a deal to give Israel weapons, and you've been giving Israel money, but you're giving them even more money. Nobody's knocking that. We understand that. Well, some people might knock it, pro-Palestinian supporters and what have you may knock it, but the real issue is, how'd you come up with the money? You kept saying that you didn't have it for issues that are pertinent inside this country. But every time something happens outside our borders, somehow, some way, America's got a hand in it, and they got enough money to help subsidize whatever you need to subsidize.
All right, let's follow the money. All right?
Sure.
Let's follow the money. Trump's policies benefited the wealthy more than it benefited the working class.
I agree with that.
So how is he a savior of the working class if his policies are benefiting the wealthy?
Because he addressed...
And it's the middle class and the working class that are paying the majority of taxes.
One of the reasons why I love you so much is because you edify me all the time in terms of telling me things that I may not have known or articulating things I didn't know, but with such brilliance, it just hits home. But I tend to do the same for you from time to time.
Yes, you do.
And allow me to try to do that right here. What you just said is accurate. It's also irrelevant to his supporters. And the reason why it's irrelevant to his supporters is because that verbiage that you just threw out, no matter how accurate it may be, doesn't touch them on a personal level in their eyes. What touches them is, we're white. We made up 90% of the American population. Then it dwindled to 85, and then 80, and then 75 to 70. It's now supposedly hovering around 60%. It's lessening. They're telling us by the year 2030 that Latinos in this country are going to make up more than 30%. They're already the dominant minority. They're going to proliferate even more. What's happening to us? Why do you think he brings up the borders? He's implying they got your jobs. Why do you think he brings up inflation now that that's been a problem under the Biden administration? See how much it's costing you? So not only do they got your jobs, but then now the jobs you do have still doesn't pay you enough. See, I'd take care of all of that. I'd make sure you get paid. You wouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to get food at the supermarket and to still pay your rent or your mortgage and to buy a car, whatever. Oh no, one job would do it under my administration. They're lying to you. Fake news. They're corrupt. You see what they're doing to me. This is why they're trying to stop me. You see all of these cases they're throwing at me. Is it an accident that this has happened when they knew that I was going to run for re-election? I'm going to be the GOP nominee. This is what happened. How do we have the proof of that? Every time an indictment came down against him, his campaign dollars elevated. It's exactly what happened. They said, you're out to get him. When they got convicted of 34 felony counts, they were like, oh, please, we don't care. Fake news. The court system is rigged. That's what they said. I mean, everywhere you turn, he's got a built-in excuse for why it's happening, where he's labeled the victim. And as a result, they're saying they're just trying to take you down, which is why, thank heavenly stars, that he was not killed on that assassination attempt. Because let me tell you what I think would have happened, Pastor. People like the Proud Boys and others would have went like this. Oh, so that's how we doing it. That's how we doing it. And there would have been violence in the streets of America, and you best believe there would have been a big-time bullseye on the backs of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. This is the kind of stuff that goes on
You
in this
think
country.
this is where we are as
I
a
think this is
nation?
where we are.
Because
I think this is where we are.
That frightens many people concerning the outcome of this election. If he loses,
Which is
how are they going to react?
And
they being his supporters.
I would say to you, if you notice, when I talk about Donald Trump, I don't even get to policy. Because that right there is the number one reason he should not be president. Because Al Gore is competing against George W. Bush for the presidency in 2000. It's nip and tuck and hanging chads in Florida and all of this other stuff ultimately determined what would happen. But let us not forget, the Democrats were breathing down Al Gore's neck to fight, fight, fight. And Al Gore stood up and said, that is not what is best for America. And he backed up. And he backed up. At some point in time, the true measure of whether you're a leader, whether you're a statesman, is when you clearly put yourself on Front Street to let the world know this ain't about you. It's about us.
Which is what Biden did.
Which is what Biden did.
But Trump would not do.
And Trump would not
He's
do.
already proven
That's right.
that if he doesn't win,
That's
the
right.
election is rigged.
That's
if he
right.
wins, the election was
Exactly.
square. It
Exactly.
wasn't rigged. Let's follow the money. Let's talk about some more of the money.
Yes.
All right? And I have to quote Jesus. He said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Right?
Yep.
Where your heart is, conversely, that's where your treasure is going to be.
Okay.
So when we look at the budget, Democrat versus Republican, let's put Trump aside, all right?
Okay.
And even Kamala Harris aside.
Sure.
When we look at the budget, the spending, what does the Republican Party spend money on, and what does the Democratic Party spend money on? Because that's going to be important, because that's going to determine what's going to impact me personally.
Yes.
So when we look at the Republicans,
National
what's the
defense.
top of that? Defense.
Yes.
Military spending.
That's right.
We're talking about business,
Yep.
right?
In that order. In that order.
Yeah. And on the other side, you're talking about education. You're talking about social programming. You're talking about equity.
Yeah.
All right. So wouldn't it make sense that if I look at how the money is being spent and how that's going to impact me, that's going to help me make a decision as to what political party I'm going to lean?
Without question, but here's where the trick comes in. And I've had to learn this by speaking to political pundits that have educated me about this. They said no matter what American people tell you, they vote their issue. Whatever their issue is, whatever's most important. There are most folks, like if you're pro-life or pro-choice, that's your issue. If you're about the economy, that's your issue.
Blinded to everything else.
Blinded to everything else. Nothing. Everything you're blind. It's not so much that you're literally blinded to everything else, but your issue. It has been, according to them, statistically speaking, their issue has decided their vote more than 95% of the time.
Right.
And so when you know what that reality is, okay, what's the touch points of what your issue may be? If you are white in America and you are not well off, they're the reasons why. See that what's going on at our borders?
The scapegoating. Yeah.
You see what's going on at our borders? 10.5 million illegal immigrants crossed our borders. That's what he's saying. And they're like, yeah. Okay, business, okay, yeah. You know, this is why you can't get a job. Or inflation. You know why? Because it costs so much. One job ain't enough. One job's not enough. And this is what they're saying to you. Okay, healthcare. Yeah, Obama, it bleeds into the system. Why are they saying that? Because if you have universal health care, the money has to come from somewhere. And if the money is coming from somewhere, it's not coming to you. It's going to that. So that hurts your job prospects as well. That hurts your quality of life as well. Yeah.
But now realizing that you're part of the 40 million
That's right.
people that health care plan actually impacts in a positive way.
Correct. But here's the flip side. And this is where I blame Democrats. That might be true. I'll say it is true. I support that. The problem is, on too many occasions, you've used that as an excuse to take advantage in other areas because greed and gluttonous have taken over the day. You've got this one issue. We've come to find out on Capitol Hill, well, okay, well, we're voting on health care, but we're going to slide in something about the border. We're going to slide in something about the economy. We're going to slide in something over here. And then all of a sudden, it was like, wait a minute, that's not what y'all were negotiating for. So you use one bill to facilitate getting some of the things that you want that you couldn't get anywhere else when you were upfront about it. And you've got all of these shenanigans going on Capitol Hill, and then the information seeps out to the public that this is the kind of stuff that got in the way of getting things done. And then we say them. And then somebody comes along and says, I'm not like them. And here's the thing. In Trump's case, there are others. I haven't said this, but there are some who have said it's like a cult following, his following.
Yeah.
Well, here's where the problem lies. Do you know it's not really with him? It's with all of the Republican representatives. You know why? Because they march lockstep with him. And so as a result, because they know he's the kind of person that's petty enough to turn on you and say, he's the reason this didn't happen. She's the reason this didn't happen. And then your constituency turns against you. You're out of office, which means you're out of power. He manipulated that. And as a result, other people get on board. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. List goes on and on and on. Nikki Haley, others.
So the fear is on both sides. The fear is within his own party.
But unlike the others, in Trump's case, he's the kind of person that has gotten everybody on that side of the aisle to align with him to get what he wants done strictly out of fear. He'll cost them their seats. And if you're the public who supports him, you're like, great, finally somebody got to do it, as opposed to all of this talk about compromise and working across the aisle and all of this stuff. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. And what they're missing is the mayhem that creates. Because when you don't showcase an ability to compromise, it has to be your way then at all costs.
Right.
And that at all cost sentence that I just threw out there can mean anything, usually to the detriment of a democratic system.
That's what makes it so dangerous. I'm going to switch the conversation, but it's still in the same vein. NABJ, and let me thank you for what you did. I was stuck in the airport, didn't make it. We sponsored, ARB Media sponsored the Gospel Brunch. We had Yolanda Adams there, choir, Darwin Hobbs, and you and Jackie Reed were able to have a conversation. So thank you. You were going to introduce me, and I was going to communicate a message. But it went over very, very well. Okay. But it was the close of a very interesting week for the National Association of Black Journalists. Yes. And I'm pointing specifically to the panel discussion that took place earlier in the week with Donald Trump. Yep. What are your thoughts on that discussion?
I think Rachel Scott for ABC, she's somebody that I know. She's a rising star in this business. She has superstar potential written all over her. She's a really, really special talent as a reporter, somebody covering Capitol Hill. One could argue you may not have needed to start off the questions the way that she did. Came right at him with, some people feel you didn't belong here and blah, blah, blah. But she did her job, and she did it fabulously well. But as Donald Trump said, I think that's a horrible, rude question. You didn't seem to say, hello, how are you? You know, I mean, this is what he was doing.
Your Donald Trump impersonation.
That's what he did. And so, you know, so it was very, very, you know, it was uncomfortable, to say the least, but very predictable. Anytime you're not celebrating him, anytime you find yourself in a position where you're scrutinizing him with facts and you're being heavy-handed with it, he's going to respond the way that he responded. For me personally, I was disappointed in some of the things I saw from the NABJ. I had a problem with people protesting Donald Trump speaking at the NABJ conference. That is ridiculous. He is the GOP nominee. One of two people are going to be the president of the United States, him or somebody else. you don't ignore him. If anything, you take advantage of the opportunity to scrutinize him.
That's important what you just said, because that's how I saw it. It
Yes.
was an opportunity, and the question is, how did we handle that opportunity?
I don't believe
we didn't handle it well.
We didn't handle it well.
And I'm talking about we.
That's
it's
right.
a National Association
right.
of
It's
Black
us.
Journalists.
It's
so
us.
it's our platform that he can
That's
speak
right.
into.
That's right. And so you have to give him, listen, this is what I don't understand about us in our industry sometimes. The cameras are rolling. The audio's rolling. Oh, he's going to lie. Let him lie. Let him lie. Oh, he's just going to be evasive. Let him be evasive.
But that's who he is.
That's who he is.
Yeah.
It's the cameras are rolling. We have the evidence. Okay? You don't go into an interview trying to be as cantankerous, as belligerent, as you expect him to be. That's unnecessary. And I thought that the reporters on stage did an admirable job in trying to move the conversation along and get in the questions that they got in. I thought the audience could have handled themselves better. I thought others who spoke out and didn't want him there, I thought it was just ridiculous. I thought Earl Graves, Jr., I thought he had every right to depart and feel the way that he feel. We're the National Association for Black Journalists. And he is one of the preeminent members of black media in terms of the magazine or the publications he owns, et cetera, et cetera. How do you not have somebody from black media up there? Everybody was mainstream. No, that's not cutting it. And so I thought he made a very valid point there. Why are all three women? Why wasn't there a male up there asking him a question? Had there been three males up there, folks would have been going off about how there was no women up there. So you're the NABJ. You're supposed to address this. And then to deny Kamala Harris the opportunity to speak initially because she couldn't show up in attendance.
She wanted to come in virtually.
Because she wanted to come in virtually. We've interviewed plenty of people virtually. Why couldn't you do that for her? So we just things that we could have done better. We didn't. They clearly made these decisions, a few people, whoever they were.
Think strategically with me.
And they didn't think strategically.
And that's the problem I had. Because it's my understanding that they wanted to fact check him real time, right?
Inexcusable.
That's what they wanted. He supposedly and his team pushed back against it.
May I interject there for a second?
Go ahead.
I've worked in media for 30 years. I've been at ESPN for 20. I worked at the New York Daily News. I worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I worked at CNN. I worked at Fox Sports, worked at ESPN. Never in my 30 years in this business have I encountered a scenario where you had a fact checker in real time to interject while an interview was taking place. That is flat out juvenile.
But I didn't know how they were going to accomplish that.
It doesn't matter how they were going to accomplish it. It's not something most folks would agree to do during an interview, especially if you're a politician. Especially if you're a politician. Nobody. Find me the politician who agreed to that.
Why wouldn't he agree to it? Why wouldn't any politician agree to being fact-checked in real time?
Because obviously they all tell their own truth, and spin doctoring is a mechanism that they've mastered. But the other side to it is that you don't want to disrupt the flow of a conversation. Your objective as a politician is to convince people to flow with you. If you're interrupted at every turn because somebody wants to fact check what you said in the moment, you can't possibly win getting a message across. I don't know of one single politician in my lifetime that has ever or would ever agree to being fact checked on the spot in the middle of an interview. Now, you can do it after the interview's over. You can have somebody like CNN or somebody else having fact checkers on to tell you how many lies somebody told or whatever. No, you can do that. That's no problem. But
not wait 1 minute. That's a lie.
Wait a minute. That's not true. No, you're not doing that. Nobody's agreeing to an interview. Like, Pastor, I'm not lying to anybody. I'm not agreeing to that. I don't want. Why do I need to subject myself to that? If Pastor Bernard, who I love dearly, wants to interview me and says, "Well, we're gonna fact check everything you say in real time in the moment that you say it," okay, because it's you. But I'm not excited about doing the interview because it's not a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a Q&A or anything like that. It's like, wait a minute, let's make sure every single syllable I utter is 100% correct and not subject to scrutiny. Really? What politician you know is a
And what kind of conversation would that be?
Right.
But all right, so let's talk about the journalists. You had 3 journalists.
Yes.
All right, and no offense to anyone, but Rachel Scott seemed she was the lead.
Yes, she was.
All right,
She was.
and quite competent, quite
Yes, very much
capable,
so. Very capable.
of moving that conversation.
Right.
But wasn't she hampered by the fact that she had these other 2 journalists on stage with
No.
her, and had to defer to them respectfully?
Well,
so that she couldn't follow through on the questioning?
Let me take that back. You're always hampered to some degree when other people are in your way doing what you're doing.
Right.
So, especially with Ms. Faulkner for Fox News, she was clearly there because Donald Trump wanted her there, and clearly came across as somebody there to be protective of him.
Right. Right.
And I felt that it was wrong of her to go on national television the next day and to say that it wasn't what it was supposed to be and didn't stand up for her contemporaries that were on stage with her. I thought that was very unfair on her part. But that's for her to explain. As it pertains to Rachel Scott being derailed to some degree, I'm going to tell you who derailed her. The NABJ. Because the audience, the climate that was created leading up to Trump's arrival, it put an immense amount of pressure on her to do more than her job. It was to appease them. That's not why she was there. She's there to ask the questions that people want to ask and give the GOP nominee an opportunity to answer. She ain't there to make friends with the audience. And see, this is where Pastor Bernard has to come in and he has to say, Stephen, I need you to. Why? Because you know me, and you know I would not have cared. I would have told all of them to kiss off. I'm here to do this job. I'm not here to appease you. This is about our community. Let's ask the questions that need to be asked. Let's make sure he answers the questions, and then we will judge accordingly. Not to disrupt the process, to act as if we're flexing, to show how demonstrative we're willing to be. All of that is pomp and circumstance and devoid of substance. And in the end, we accomplish nothing as an organization.
I'm glad you said that, because I respect Rachel Scott and her competence, as I said, her capabilities. But I really wanted her to press the issue.
Yes.
To hold Trump's feet to the fire.
Right.
And get him to answer the question.
Right.
And that was quite difficult for her because, again, she had that setup on stage was not conducive to holding him, because he's going to deflect, he's going to redirect, or he's going to evade.
Well,
he's going to do what he does.
I certainly,
but he controlled the narrative. He controlled the conversation. He controlled the panel discussion.
I certainly don't want to come across as somebody that's telling Rachel or anybody else what to do. They're gifted at what they do. I believe that I know a thing or two about journalism. Let me tell you how I would have done the Donald Trump.
Right.
I would have started.
How would Stephen A. Smith have handled that situation?
Thank you for being here. President Trump, because he was the president, 45th president. Why should black people want you to be the president of the United States of America? Period. Period. Then I would have came back after his answer and I would have said, but you do know you said this, and you said this, and you said this, and you said that. So knowing that you said those things, there are black people here in this audience. What would you like to say to them about those comments you've made?
Now, of course, he would have still done what he does.
I don't think so.
Because I'm immediately thinking about how he would respond to those questions.
I don't think so. I don't think so, because what happened is, hello, how are you? And then let's get right to it.
Yeah.
You're amongst African Americans. Why should they want you as the next president of the United States?
Yeah.
And then after that, because when he answers the question, then you're piggybacking off of his history compared to his comments he just made, and you're doing it. He would not have been able to come like that.
Yeah, engaging the question. Yeah.
That's it.
But
what you did was you threw a tsunami of stuff on him, right? And again, Rachel's great, and I understood why she did. I'm not blaming her because I think overall she did a great job. But I think what happened is that with all the noise that was being made, with one woman stepping down and Earl Graves leaving the conference and boycotting the conference and all of this other stuff going on, there was immense pressure for her to do more than her job. And I know this for a fact because, as I've said to people on many occasions, when ESPN and Disney may not want me touching on a subject and stuff like that, I said, let me tell you something. Do you know when Trayvon Martin was killed back in 2012? I said, everywhere I went, what you gonna say? What you gonna say, Stephen? Stephen, you gonna speak on this, right? I said, they did it when Philando Castillo was killed by the cop in Minnesota. They did it when Freddie Gray was killed in Baltimore. They did it when Michael Brown was killed in Missouri. They did it when George Floyd was killed. I said, everywhere you turn. These were not sports stories. But because I was a black man that had that platform available to me, our community was clamoring for us to give a voice to the voiceless. Because what I always tell white America is this: white folks come to work with a job to do every day. We come with a responsibility. You got to say this. You got to speak on that. Here's what you got to do. This is what you got to do. Now, I feel no pressure to say what people want me to say. I think for me. But what I do feel an obligation to do is to address the subjects that our community wants us to address.
Is that why you were willing to move from, I would say, from the frying pan into the fire?
Me?
You, successful sports commentator. Now you've taken on full force social and political issues, moral issues that are outside the realm of sports. Were you motivated because there's a need for a voice?
In part, but the biggest reason is because I've been asked. I don't stand up and say, could you have me on CNN? Could you have me on MSNBC? Could you bring me on Fox News? Could you bring me on News Nation? Could you bring me on ABC, NBC, CBS? Could you do this? I don't do that. But when you call me, I'm thinking about, well, who you gonna call if you don't call me? What are they gonna say? How conscientious are they? How much do they care? How fearless will they be? Will they have the courage to say what I know I'll have the courage to say?
So there was a need for a straight shooter, and that's Stephen A. Smith. So let's talk about Sean Hannity.
Yep.
He's right wing.
Yep.
Clearly. This is what he does, and he tries his best to do it well. But you have a relationship with him.
Yes, I do.
Why?
Sean Hannity and I go back 20 years. When I first got into the business, when I first arrived at ESPN, he saw me on TV, thought I was a real talent, was very complimentary towards me. We'd run across one another, say hello, et cetera, et cetera. When I got fired in 2009, there was no bigger advocate speaking out about how I had gotten screwed over and I had gotten treated unfairly. There was no bigger advocate than him and Mark Levin, who's also a big-time conservative radio host. And years later, when I got suspended because we were talking about domestic violence, and I was simply talking about, I uttered the word provoke. I wasn't trying to say that a woman provokes domestic violence. You remember I had that discussion with you.
Yeah.
What I was saying is that, well, if you have daughters, and I have daughters, at a moment where strife or a very, very tense situation develops, I'm thinking about you getting out of there so you can live to fight another day. Daddy ain't around. Aunts, uncles ain't around. You don't have brothers, etc. You're by yourself. What can you do to get out of that situation in the moment so you can live to fight another day? Because you got some crazy folks out here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially a man that would be indecent enough to put his hands on a woman, which I have never done. Okay? So I was speaking about that. And it was shifted into me uttering the word provoke and implying that a woman provokes domestic violence upon herself.
I remember.
And the critics pounced on it, and you remember how furious I was. It was the great, to this day, it is the greatest insult that I have ever received in my professional career. I was raised by 5 women. You knew my mama, my 4 older sisters. Everybody knows I would never put my hands on a woman. I would never condone putting my hands on a woman. A matter of fact, I've gotten in trouble, and men have gotten in trouble for coming to the defense of women who were having their hands put on by a man. So it is incredible. It's the greatest insult that I have ever received in my career. But nevertheless, ESPN at the time, under that leadership, caved to public pressure and suspended me. And it was crickets everywhere. Barely anyone spoke up for me. And I always remember that. Sean Hannity was one of those people. Mark Levin was another. And I never forgot it.
What does it say?
And so because of that, I argue and butt heads with them all the time about politics.
That's my point.
All the time.
But you can have a civil relationship outside of that context.
Exactly. And they appreciate it. Here's what they appreciate about me. I don't think they're racist because they disagree with me. Yeah. I don't view them that way. We argue, we butt heads, the whole bit. I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you doing? Because in their world, the liberals have destroyed this country because, economic stability, national security, controlling our borders. To them, it's blanket. It's just like that. To me, it's a bit more complex than that. And it's not to say they're devoid of complexity, because obviously they're 2 very smart individuals. I'm just simply saying they view it differently than I do. But here's the thing about me, for better or worse. Pastor, if you're a white middle-aged guy or older, I don't expect you to have the same sensibilities I have. We come from 2 different worlds. I've seen people like, they're looking at a Ted Cruz, or they're looking, I remember Strom Thurmond was in South Carolina, and Armstrong Williams was like a mentor. I couldn't understand that. You understand? I couldn't understand that. And I'm looking at, they're not going to have our sensibility. I remember when Jerry Jones made news because of some of the positions he took involving Colin Kaepernick, involving the protest and stuff like this. And Jerry Jones was famous with the Cowboys. According to reports, insiders, he had a meeting during the whole protest and taking the knee and all of this stuff. And Jerry Jones said, I can appreciate where y'all coming from, but this is Texas. He said, and down here, they think a bit differently. And you doing something like that is going to affect my bottom line. Let me assure you, if it affects my bottom line, it's going to affect your bottom line. And that's what supposedly he
brought
said.
To the money, yeah.
So I'm saying to you, you're looking at a Jerry Jones, somebody's looking at a Jerry Jones, and they're looking at this 80-plus-year-old man from Arkansas. I'm looking at that, plus the fact that he's a billionaire. And I'm like, he's a bit detached from the kind of experiences normal black folks have. Why would I expect him to have my sensibilities? I don't expect it. Yeah. All I can hope for is that, let's talk this out. Let's have a conversation. Put your ideas and your perspective and your position up against mine. Let's have that conversation. Because trying to bully you into doing so, I may find one way to do it, but it'll come back to bite us. And one of the things that I utilize is, let's take, for example, the strikes that were taking place in Hollywood. When you had SAG-AFTRA and the directors and others, against the studios. Yeah, they reached an accord. Yeah, money was lost. We won something. Fine. Have you noticed that not many shows are being produced as it used to be? Have you noticed that the number of opportunities that was out there to build content, create and build content? Let's say, for example, you might create 10 to 12 shows a year. You might greenlight that. Now it's dwindled to 6 to 8. They're gonna get their money. They're gonna get their money. They're gonna find a way to make sure that no matter how much you think you pinched them, they pinched you.
Yeah.
That's the world that I'm exposed to.
And that's the way it works.
And that's the way it works.
Yeah.
And so we can be altruistic, and we could have this mentality. This is the way it should be. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But I also have an obligation to pay attention to what is and how it works. And when I think about, to get back to your original question about the Sean Hannity and stuff, folks think about he's talking and he's cool with Sean Hannity. You're not thinking about the fact that he's giving me the airwaves, same airwaves that he has, to disagree with him, to challenge him, to be on him about what I feel. That's the difference. See, when you're in a cocoon and you just saying what you're saying and spewing what you're spewing and building this following.
That bubble, yeah.
That bubble, right? And you're not subjecting yourself to any kind of scrutiny, you got a point. But when he's saying, all right, here's the platform, say what you got to say, and we're putting our beefs out on Front Street, well, then who knows who that's going to sway? And that's how I think about it.
But there's a relationship
Yes.
that's foundational to that
Yes.
experience. And that's the problem. We don't have those kind of relationships, enough of those kind of relationships where two individuals who disagree with each other can sit down and have a conversation.
And which is what I tell Sean Hannity and Mark Levin all the time. Everybody ain't me. I can talk to y'all. Everybody don't get the opportunity to talk to y'all. Y'all got to be a bit more reasonable, you know? And they go, come on, Stephen. And I'm like, come on. You got to do that. Sometimes they agree with me. Sometimes they don't. But you'd be surprised how they might have a perspective. And I can sit up there and say, don't do that. Here's why. Yeah, you got a point.
We can go on. We're coming down to the close of our conversation. And there's so much. I mean, 2025, Project 2025. You know, quickly, what are your thoughts on that?
Can't be instituted, can't be implemented. Not just because of the verbiage and the rhetoric that's in it, but because of what the Heritage Foundation aspires for it to be.
Yeah.
That cannot happen. I mean, that would definitely take us back when you're talking about, you know, elected officials having the power to dictate who federal officials are just based on their ideologies. That's problematic. When you talk about reproductive rights being permanently compromised, listen, I'm a pro-life guy. I'm not about abortion, but I'm a man and I have a very, very difficult time telling a woman what to do with her body, which is why I would classify myself as pro-choice, even though I'm totally against abortion. And so I look at things like that, and then I defer to people like you with stuff like that. I'm like, that's above my pay grade.
In the moral realm, right.
I mean, that's above my pay grade. I'm not going there, but ultimately when you see the kind of things that Project 2025 is trying to institute, it's clearly an agenda that wants to take us back to a time that we worked diligently to get beyond. There's no denying it. Yeah. And so for Trump to say he has nothing to do with it, but for somebody who used to work in his administration to be one of the architects,
a few individuals,
a few of them, right? Yeah. I mean, there's just no way around it. That simply cannot happen.
It's an ideological purging of the American government.
Without question.
The American system.
Without question.
And that's the scary thing.
And you have people, listen, you do have people that want America, that wants America to burn, that wants America destroyed. And what you want to say to them is, what America are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because you didn't want it that way when it was the way it was in the 60s or the 50s or even before that. All right, well, you want it that way now. Well, why exactly do you want it that way now? Explain that, And so when you hold their feet to the fire and give them an opportunity, there are those who cower. There are those who see the errors of their ways. And there are those who are just ignorant and oblivious to anybody else's agenda outside of their own. And you know what that's about.
Stephen A., it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you, and I hope that you will come back so we can
Anytime.
continue, because there will always be with you something to talk about. I respect how you focus on the issues. And I think one of the most important things that you said today is that people vote their concerns, not even their values.
Right.
Their values can take second place to their concerns because
work.
that's what's immediately impacting them and that they're concerned about. So we can't end this conversation without the big question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the big question. What was Snoop Dogg doing at the Olympics?
Everything. Everything. I mean, I think they say he was getting about $500,000 a day, for crying out loud. But he was just having the time of his life. I think that NBC, they reportedly had invested about $7.8 billion into the Olympics.
Yeah.
And because of that, they wanted to make sure that they had an A-list of commentators, pundits, hosts, etc., but also wanted to have that star attraction. Snoop Dogg is one of the biggest stars in the world. He knows his sports. He genuinely loves sports competition. Like people, you ask me about me and politics, I'll never leave sports. Sports will always take a front seat in my life. I just don't want to be limited to it. And one of the people who have personally spoken about that stuff to me over the years is Snoop Dogg. We're friends. We communicate quite often. And, Snoop Dogg and I are pretty tight. He is somebody that is a Renaissance man to the core. And knowing where he comes from, the streets, Compton, where he was born and raised, the kind of things that he got entrenched with and intertwined with, what he's overcome. It's phenomenal. Yeah. It's phenomenal. And it's role model status because it shows that no matter how dire circumstances may appear in life, as long as you're living and breathing, you got a shot to get out of it. Yeah. You got a shot to make a better way and to find a better way for yourself. And the brilliance of him is to be this black dude from the streets and to find a way to ingratiate himself with people of all ethnicities, no matter the gender, etc. It's Snoop Dogg. You see him there hanging with Martha Stewart. What could they possibly have in common? Right? Yet they work together. They have love for one another, because when you get to know people, no matter what you disagree about, when each of you recognize that there's a core decency about the other, you can propel forward and you can contribute in your small way to making the world a better place. And I live by that, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to close our conversation. The idea that this is an America, and we want to make sure it stays this way, where no matter what the circumstances of your beginning, it doesn't have to determine the outcome. Right. You can change that. You can make a difference.
That's right.
It may be harder for you than for others, but it's still possible.
Well, anything worth having is not going to be easy.
Yeah. All good things are upstream. Sometimes you got to paddle hard.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right. Get you in better shape.
Stephen A. Smith, thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure, as always, Pastor.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I'm really proud of your journey and the impact that you're having on our society.
It's getting scary, but I love it.
I know you do. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us today. I know that you've been blessed by this conversation. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Please subscribe and share. We hope you'll join us for our next time here on the A.R. Bernard Show. Until then, God bless.